Today we continue to confront reality. Admiral Stockdale mentioned that if we're going to be successful into the future, if we're going to actually survive, if we're going to get out of here alive and we're going to be better for it, then we have to confront the realities of our daily life, the brutal realities at times. I've been praying that during this time, one of the brutal realities that we come to face and to realize and to admit, it'll be a great blessing for us, us as individuals, and for our culture if we come to admit that social media, that the internet, that our phones, that computers, that all of that, they aren't ultimately satisfying and they don't run our lives. That there's something so much more important to our lives than these things, and we come to realize that we've spent way too much time using them. And I know that that reality comes during times when we're especially bored. If you've had the experience during this time that we've been apart from one another and you've been at home without much to do, of just incessantly clicking on something, it's almost like you have this inability to stop clicking. You start binge watching something on Netflix, on YouTube, maybe the Snapchat, maybe TikTok, whatever it is, you just keep going. And all of a sudden you have all this anticipation and you feel like you can't stop. And then at the end of it, have you had the experience where you just feel exhausted? Maybe mentally and maybe even emotionally, maybe even physically. That the next day you just have this crash. Yeah, that's called a dopamine hangover. Yeah, dopamine is that chemical that's in our brain it has a lot of expectation. And in that expectation, we just keep clicking because there's got to be a payoff. There's got to be something more. And I can't stop until I'm ultimately satisfied. And we realize that we're never satisfied. Yeah, and that hangover is what teaches us that this isn't satisfying. We shouldn't repeat the process. Yet we're back at it the next day because we forget what we're actually looking for. And last week I mentioned that we are actually in this for relationships. Our lives are made for relationships. Our lives are made to share love, to share intimacy. Wait, is he going to talk about sex? Y'all, intimacy, the word intimacy is not equivalent to the word sex. Sex is a way that we can share in intimacy. But if it's not done in the right way, it's not intimacy at all. And it won't have the payoff. In fact, we're sitting at home and one of the brutal realities is that physical intimacy is missing. And again, by physical intimacy, I don't mean sex. Even just sitting in the presence of somebody else, sitting across the table with somebody else, hugging someone, right? Being in the presence of our friends and sharing life with them, that's physical intimacy. And I know that we're missing that right now. But I have good news for you. Physical intimacy isn't the height of intimacy. In fact, it's one of the lowest levels of intimacy that there is. Above physical intimacy is emotional intimacy, intellectual intimacy, and ultimately the heights of intimacy is spiritual intimacy. It's the depths of ourself. What does the word intimacy mean? It means the sharing of ourselves. That's why it's done through vulnerability. It's sharing ourselves with another so that we can be known, fully known. And by being fully known, being fully loved. That's what we're all desiring. That connectivity, that's why we're doing these videos. And so right now, even now, I'm telling you, that if you want to baptize your social media or your online communication, start sharing intentionally. Pick up the phone. Don't just Snapchat somebody. Pick up the phone and actually ask them how they're doing. That's sharing an emotional intimacy. Share your dreams with somebody else. You know how vulnerable it is to share your dreams with somebody else or have them share it with you? They're sharing the deepest level of themselves. Share your expectations, your dreams with somebody else. That's a sharing in intimacy. That's a sharing of self. How about having an intellectual conversation about something that's stimulating? And what about a spiritual conversation? You know, we still have our small groups going here at St. John's. And those small groups are going because we want to share in spiritual intimacy with others, the heights, the depths of ourself. Spiritual intimacy is the height because there's an infinite intimacy with God because God is eternal. God is infinite. And so we share in that conversation. We share it with others. We share it with God. Your spiritual intimacy is still going to be the greatest level when you engage in prayer, when you engage in worship. The good news is that we still have all those things alive. The brutal reality is that we have to admit it. We have to admit that we're just trying to be entertained sometimes online. And it's not going to be satisfying until we share in this intentional way. I'm asking you today to purify your computer, to purify the ways that you communicate with somebody else. Talk about life. If you want physical intimacy, hug your mom and your dad. Those are people that you already share emotional and intellectual and spiritual intimacy with. And that's the only way that physical intimacy is actually satisfying is when we share all of those things together. Yo, we might be apart right now, but there's ways that we can have connectivity. There's ways that we can face this reality right now and get even better. Continue sharing yourselves with others so that you can be known. By being known, you can be loved. By being loved, you can be satisfied.